born of many brethren, the firstborn of Ha Elohim, in S, i.e., the first and the oldest consciousness, and let's say sustainable consciousness in existence. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil as an allegory for Kanehbosem, as an allegory for cannabis. Kanehbosem is the plant that, quote, God, Elohim, in the Hebraic sense, warned humanity, or the first humans, as ones would teach and preach it, not to eat from in the Ganeta Eden, in the Garden of Delight, in the Garden of Eden. According to Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 to 17, and the Lord God commanded the man, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of Melkamana Kufu, of good and evil. For when you eat of it, you will surely die. Now, why this analogy? Why this analogy? What does this analogy teach us? Why is Kanehbosem the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and not the tree of life? Lemisale, for example. Well, God himself declares after the fall in Genesis chapter 3, verse 22, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. Now, the previous passage implies immediately that whatever it was that Adam and Adam and Eve ate from, was not the tree, quote, the tree of life, end quote. For if it was, man would become, by the words of God himself above, immortal, end quote, live forever. After eating the plant, not only man did not become immortal, he did not become immortal by eating of that plant, he instead started dying. According to Genesis 3 and 19, until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. According to Orit Fikret, chapter 3, verse 19, the Torah of the creation, or the book of Genesis. Now, since there were only two important plants in the garden, or trees, we can say, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life, and Kanehbosem is one of the naturally important plants. Kanehbosem must have been the tree of the knowledge of Melkamana Kufu, or good and evil. Now, what's the underlying metaphor here? The seminar work here. What's the underlying metaphor? The underlying metaphor is that to those who are unaware of the more spiritual truths that are behind enlightenment or illumination, really to mean becoming a true Hebrew, Ibrawian, and to those who are bound by material, worldly, quote, system, the system of things, world, Kanehbosem is a dangerous, quote unquote, plant, because it causes mind alterations which force the consumer to question the deep nature of things via deep insights, including law and order and the very foundations of the system itself. When people question such things, usually what happens? When people start to question things like law and order and the very foundation of the system that they're living in, what usually happens? Anarchy. anarchy is what occurs, and the latter is far from desirable. It is definitely not desirable. Now, did we say that cannabis or Kanehbosem? I like to stress the Hebraic of it's the ones who recognize that even the name cannabis is coming out the Hebraic, the Masoretic text of the Bible. But they did not translate it. Did I tell you this? You understand? While the connection is somewhat obvious, several people, including many Christians who studied the Bible, you understand, and go into the Strong's Concordance and the Gesenius Lexicon, usually they do not acknowledge it. They don't want to acknowledge it. You understand? And we're sure that we're going to get some very interesting responses to even this, discussing this subject matter. But this probably stems from the fact that most people interpret literally. Remember what Hawaria Paulos, Hawaria Shaul said, Paul. He said that in the letter kills, the letter of the law kills, but the spirit of the law is what gives life. But they interpret, these type of people, these literal so-called straight thinking or orthodox thinking Christians, they interpret the Bible's literal warning as an explicit prohibition. They interpret what's literally there as explicit prohibition. This quote, mas enkekia, or warning, is the ancient Hebrews, and Hebrew meaning enlightened ones, those who cross from ignorance, from ignosis to epinosis. It was an ancient Hebrew effort, the mas enkekia, an ancient Hebrew effort to screen or to veil the unworthy ones from the profound insights that Kanehbosem provides. This is why Revelation would say, who is worthy to open the book? You understand? The unworthy were unable, so the book remained unopened. Kanehbosem qualifies as, quote, a tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and consuming it qualifies as a holy communion. Common union, precisely because it's inherently tied to two key notions which are related to its consumption. And this is very, extremely important. Johannes, the composer, really touched on something right here. You understand, and summarized it very well. What are the two key notions? One is choice, mercha, with regard to wanting or desiring to experience the truth. See, some people want to know the truth. Some people want to be the truth. You understand? So the choice with regard to wanting to experience the truth, and rai, and revelation, the revealing of the truth, like the Urim and the Tumim. These two notions will be and must be analyzed and scrutinized further in the rest of this article, as well as our study on this subject matter. Now we just want to make this point about Kanehbosem from the last part that we had touched on, where we said that Kanehbosem is a dangerous plant. Why? Because it causes mind alterations. You know, they said that marijuana is a psychoactive drug, and you have to stop and scrutinize this and break it down and get a good Webster's dictionary and study the etymology. What does psychoactive mean? You understand? Well, we know what active means, right? Sometimes inactive is like dead, and if it's active, it's living. Psycho, what does psycho mean? Psycho means the mind. Psycho comes from the Greek suke, which means the soul, or the nefesh, or the nefs. So it's a nefs active. It activates on the soul, on the mind, on the feeling, the thought, the emotions of human beings. And that's one of the reasons why the system, you understand, categorizes Kanehbosem as a psychoactive. They say it's a gateway. That's what they call it, a gateway drug. Now, that's to imply that it's a gateway, you understand, to higher, harder drugs, or, you know, like cocaine.